Whenever I watch a movie, a feeling I always hope to experience is surprise. Good surprises can make for the most impressive, satisfying, and cathartic experiences in all of storytelling.
I am your father.
But I think that the extreme thrill of a well-written surprise is matched only by the extreme disappointment of poorly written ones. All too often, I see attempts at surprising the audience that really end up only backfiring, which is why the writing of Rogue One was just that much more impressive. Because of our foresight of how the original trilogy pans out, we went into Rogue One knowing that its characters wouldn't live to see the end of the story. But in spite of that disadvantage, the story was still able to consistently surprise me. The narrative explored the price of freedom with an uncharacteristically honest perspective. The action balanced high stakes with brutally real consequences. And in a single movie, the hero we had never met before embodied a character arc that perfectly captured the entire spirit of Star Wars. In a galaxy far, far away where space wizards fight with laser swords and aliens do whatever this is, sometimes the war part of Star Wars ends up taking a back seat. But with Rogue One, director Gareth Edwards wanted to take a different approach. He wanted to commit to the style of a true war film and all of the ugliness that goes with it. As he put it, with war, good guys are bad and bad guys are good. But when it comes to the fascist empire that's been one of pop culture's most recognizable symbols of evil, trying to incorporate moral ambiguity is ballsy to say the least. Yet, to everyone's surprise, Rogue One was able to pull it off in an impressively thoughtful way. There's a single scene I want to isolate that I think might have some of the best written dialogue in any Star Wars movie, period. But to understand why I say that, I first want to talk about show versus tell. So I'm a firm believer that movies should always strive to say something, but the way they go about it can make or break their message. In a previous video, I've mentioned the concept of show versus tell, and how both methods of exposition have their rightful places in a story. Sometimes you have to cut to the chase, and it's okay to tell the audience exactly what they need to hear by having a character just straight up say it. Like all Star Wars movies, Rogue One tells us straight up that the Empire is bad, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think if they tried to suddenly bring empathy to the Empire, it would undo basically all of Star Wars ever. Sometimes evil can just be evil, but with something like deep moral ideas of right and wrong, telling the audience exactly what to think runs the risk of belittling them. It's a surefire way to insult the audience's intelligence and lose their trust. This is where I think showing, rather than telling, is much more effective. When I say showing, I don't always mean literal visuals. Instead, I define showing as honestly displaying as many different points of view as possible, and letting the audience determine for themselves which they think are right and wrong. Even with a simple story like Star Wars, audiences clearly crave complex and nuanced ideas. There's a reason the most beloved character in the entire franchise is Anakin Skywalker. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he both? Well, when you give audiences reasons to believe both sides, it lets them decide for themselves how to feel, which makes for a much better experience than being lectured to. The Rogue One writers were not only aware of this, but took it to heart when they decided to deviate from the traditional depiction of the rebels. With the one Anakin-shaped exception, the rebels had always been the underdog, do no wrong, bona fide good guys. That is, until Cassian Andor. A rebel who isn't afraid to get blood on his hands in the name of the cause. Anyone's blood, for that matter. The scene I want to break down that really shocked me with its nuance comes right after Jyn's father got killed. What Jyn thought was a rescue mission to extract her father was actually a planned assassination, with Andor ordered to carry it out. And while he wasn't the one to pull the trigger, the conflict between these two characters boils down to the moral principle. Jyn holds an idealist point of view, while Andor holds one of realism. And the entire time they spend hashing it out, the audience is left asking themselves which mindset a rebellion should uphold. On one hand, Jyn knows that blindly following orders is what enables empires to grow in the first place. On another hand, Andor knows that taking down an empire requires sacrifice of all kinds. And with every single line in the argument, they each deliver fantastic points. I feel like in most scenes like this, a lot of movies will pick a character who they think is more right and have them dunk on the other guy with some corny mic drop clapback, aka they tell. But with this scene, you can watch it over and over and never pick out a clear winner. This is because when writers honestly show both sides, sometimes the result is that there is no winner. In many ways, they were both wrong and they were both right, which is the entire point. Because when you watch this scene and you see no clear winner, you're left asking yourself to decide how much a rebellion should be willing to sacrifice. This is what writing nuance is all about, priming the audience to start looking for their own answer. And now that they're looking, one of the best places to find it is actually in the action. Sticking to the idea of bringing out the war in Star Wars, the action in Rogue One was one of a kind for the franchise. While the first half made sure to include the classic stormtroopers getting their butts kicked sequence to remind us it's still a Star Wars movie, the action that I want to focus on in this video comes from the show-stealing third act, the siege on Scarif, a battle so intense that critics compared it to depictions of Normandy. In order to break down exactly what makes this sequence so brilliant, I'm going to be using this chart I call the fight spectrum. My charts are kind of a big deal on this channel, and the fight spectrum is the one that started it all. The main idea is that any scene which results in a winner and a loser should be approached thoughtfully. Think, why does the winner win and why does the loser lose? To use the chart, we have to approach a scene retroactively by comparing who probably should have won with who actually does win. So with the battle on Scarif, we know that the odds are heavily stacked against the rebels, but of course they come out on top. This classifies it in the David vs. Goliath category. In order to be satisfying and believable, an underdog has to win in a clever way or else the audience will feel cheated. Because if this Rogue One ship just pulled up to Scarif with some blasters in a dream, everyone knows that they would get killed faster than the younglings around Anakin. What they need is strategy. What's that, you say? If only there was another visual that exhaustively covered every type of strategy? Bam. Here's my 5 S's of strategy. I told you I don't play when it comes to charts. By implementing a combination of these 5 tactics, a writer can believably make any underdog come out on top. And in Rogue One, we can see exactly how. First and foremost, we have to understand what a win looks like for the rebels. They aren't there to conquer the entire planet, they're there to extract the plans for the Death Star. If they can do that, they win. And since this movie is a prequel, we of course know that they do it, which is all the more reason why keeping the fight airtight and honest is so crucial. For their first act of strategy, the rebels implement a sneak attack. They arrive on Scarif aboard a stolen Imperial cargo shuttle which conceals the entire fleet of soldiers. But pulling off a heist against the Empire is going to take a lot more than the element of surprise. Before they land, they continue to strategize, delegating most of the soldiers to a diversion that will keep the garrison off of Jyn and Cassian. In turn, this creates a spot of weakness in the tower, where the plans for the Death Star are kept. Also, in the most Star Wars type of sneak attack ever, Cassian and Jyn take the uniforms of some unfortunate Imperial officers. To kick off the battle, the rebels utilize their surroundings as well as the element of surprise by detonating mines across the base while they stake outside the garrison's exit, successfully funneling stormtroopers right into their line of sight. Meanwhile, Jyn and Cassian infiltrate the tower, which is now free of stormtroopers. But the entire fight takes a sudden and massive turn when word gets out to the other rebel forces that Scarif is being invaded, so finally they join the fight too. In my fight scene philosophy, adding firepower isn't exactly a strategy. Instead, it just recontextualizes the matchup. With this boost for the rebels, their odds jump up drastically, shifting this battle to the toss-up category. While strategy remains important for toss-ups, these types of fights also give the writers an opportunity to subtly express their stances. Back to that point of movies needing to say something, a toss-up fight between 2 evenly matched opponents asks the narrative to tip the scales. Remember, we always want to be asking why the winners win and why the losers lose. But of course, that doesn't just mean they can ditch strategy altogether. So with the added reinforcements, the rebels might have gotten stronger, but this moment of progress is quickly turned into a setback. The Empire responds by activating the shield, meaning that the message the rebels hope to extract is stuck on the planet with them. Not to mention that the shuttle needs to be linked to the tower in the first place. Clearly, there are a lot of moving parts in this fight, but I think that adds to the chaos in a good way. Whenever writers add complications to their heroes' goals, it indicates to me that they want to put in effort rather than make things convenient for themselves. Bodhi has to link the cables to the shuttle, the troops need to activate the master switch to the tower, and the fleet will have to find a way to take down the shield. If you haven't guessed by now, they're all going to have to implement strategy. I'm going to jump ahead to first talk about taking the shield down, in part because I think it was an exceptionally clever use of strategy. Using ion cannons, they disable one of the Star Destroyers, turning an opponent into a surrounding. From there, they push it forward with their own ships, colliding it with the other Star Destroyer. In one of the movie's best moments, the 2 massive ships crash into the shield generator, not just disabling it, but completely destroying it. The main reason I jumped ahead to this scene is because each scene that led up to it had incorporated the single most important strategy of the movie: sacrifice. Remember that scene we broke down about 4 minutes ago with Andor and Jyn arguing? At the heart of their disagreement was the cost of freedom. How much should they be willing to sacrifice in the name of the greater good? As we know, the question was left unanswered at the end of their conversation. Only through the action in the final act would we get the story's answer. The first main character to make the ultimate sacrifice was K2, who I guess technically never was alive, but come on, you get the point. It was a pretty dramatic standoff as he guarded the database for Andor and Jyn. His sacrifice was necessary to buy them more time. but he was certainly not the last character to give his life for the cause. In a scene that still gives me chills just thinking about it, Chirrut would be the next to go. Backed into a corner, the rebels needed to get the master switch flipped, and in an amazing payoff to his long-established prayers to the Force, Chirrut miraculously crosses through the line of fire and gets the switch flipped, at the cost of his life. Bodhi would be the next to go. In a similar fashion, he makes a faithful run through a firefight in order to link the cables, and pays the price with his life too. Baze also puts forward a last stand, and all that remains from our original group are Andor and Jyn. With all of the pieces now in place, the third act's battle had not only balanced drama with believability, but it also answered the story's biggest question by completing its main character's arc. To see why I say this, I want to take a step back and look at Jyn Erso from a wider point of view. But first, I want you to take a step back and hit that like and subscribe button. In last week's video, we waged war on Mr. Beast for YouTube's throne, and we can't slow down now. We're going to use some strategy. The plan is a sneak attack. My top analysts project that if everyone watching this subscribes right now, Mr. Beast will never see it coming, and we'll probably overthrow him by next Tuesday. And if you weren't convinced yet, consult this graph. Okay, back to the video. While nuanced dialogue and calculated action sequences are some of the best ways to get complex ideas through to the audience, I think the most effective way to get a point across is through the story's hero. The ultimate version of showing in show versus tell is to have a character live an experience and let the audience see how it shapes them. For that, Rogue One created Jyn Erso, and in her we can see exactly what the writers wanted to say. The newest and maybe most applicable chart I've made on my channel is the protagonist chart. The original one is currently under construction because it's not really the most readable visual, so for now I want to introduce the much more simple Protagonist Chart 2.0, a triple Venn diagram that showcases the 3 traits that make up a protagonist. The goal is to get the character to the center of the chart, where they equally possess all 3 of the traits, making them most fit to lead a story. But it's quite rare for a protagonist to start their story at the center of the chart, so I like to gauge which traits they possess at the beginning and which traits they need to develop by the end. The first trait, influence, is the ability to attract and persuade the characters around them. This is definitely Jyn's strongest trait. The reason that she has any place in the story at all is because of her title. She's the daughter of Galen Erso, the Death Star engineer who made the entire mission possible. The only reason Jyn gets roped into this story is in hopes that she can use her influence on Saw Gerrera to persuade him and the rebels. Her next strongest trait is competence, which I define as the skills, abilities, or knowledge needed to solve the problems that the story presents. Having been raised to be a fighter, we quickly learn that Jyn is definitely capable of holding her own and advancing the plot through skill. But the third and final trait, resolve, is Jyn's shortcoming. Resolve is an unwavering desire or belief that a character can't live without. Most underdog stories are built on the protagonist's indomitable resolve, but with Jyn Erso, she's the complete opposite. Having been abandoned not once but twice in her youth, Jyn was left feeling hopeless and alone. Her faith in the rebellion was non-existent, and she had become complacent with the Empire's regime. If we look in the bottom left where I've keyed some archetypes that the chart has produced, we can see that this puts Jyn with the prodigies, characters who are socially important and individually capable, but ultimately unmotivated. So, to become the best version of herself, Jyn will have to choose to fight for something. Earlier, we established that Jyn held an idealist point of view, which resulted in her seeing things through an absolute lens. When her father had abandoned her, her conclusion was that he didn't care for her. She was a character without any glimpse of hope. However, she hears the message from Galen explaining all of the sacrifices that he made for her, and it kind of flips her world upside down. Later, when Galen dies in her arms, the spark in her is ignited, and she has found resolve to fight. But the thing about having resolve is that it's a lot easier said than done. If she really had resolve, she would have to prove it, and so the story makes her. In the conclusion of the battle on Scarif, Jyn and Andor successfully send the plans out to the skies, and this is where their debate gets settled. Through Jyn's belief of idealism, they cling to the hope that anyone out there hears their message, despite not ever truly knowing. And through Andor's belief of realism, they understand that a rebellion has a cost. To give their hope a chance, they have to pay with their lives. That is the story's answer, and it's a conclusion that the audience will feel every single time. So that concludes my Rogue One analysis. I'm definitely going to get to an Andor video eventually, but for now I'm going to primarily focus on movies. If you have one you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.